Garden of Privatised Delights is all about privatised public space across the United Kingdom. And privatised public space is any space which is publicly accessible but privately owned. And there are many different types of these spaces across the United Kingdom. And in the pavilion, we've taken 4 different typologies of these spaces and then overlaid them with 2 ministries looking at legislation behind privatised public space. So we're looking at sort of spaces like the pub, the high street, the garden square, spaces for teenagers, and then these 2 ministries which look at bottom-up approaches to legislation to do with data and also land ownership.
The title, The Garden of Privatised Delights, is inspired by this painting by Hieronymus Bosch, The Garden of Earthly Delights. And so we were really inspired by the triptych format of the painting because it has 3 panels, and there's this really amazing middle ground of earth, which you can see behind me, that sits between the 2 extremes of the utopia of heaven and then the dystopia of hell. And we used, again, the 3 panels of the painting. So we looked at how privatised public space sits between the 2 extremes of the utopia of common land. And in the UK, there was like a big legislation change in the 18th century where all of the kind of previously public land was like enclosed. And then, so that's the kind of previous history of common land was like the utopia on one side, and then the dystopia of total privatization. So the kind of the whole pavilion takes inspiration from that conceptually, but also I think materially. When you enter into the pavilion, we wanted you to feel like you were entering into the painting. And so a lot of the forms and colors that you see throughout kind of take inspiration from Bosch, and some of the fantastical, forms that you see behind me, that like kind of sculptural objects and exciting new forms of interaction that people kind of occupying the painting were engaging in.
And in order to do that, we took forms from the painting and colours from the painting to create those installations. And many of those are using the Finsa fibre colour material.
Actually, being able to use the Finsa fibre colour was really exciting because it was really important for us that public space is something that's designed with colour and texture and delight. And we were really excited to have such a range of colours to choose from, and it really has brought the exhibition to life.
These are like Georgian squares, so they're Georgian garden squares, which are familiar in British cities that came of kind of being in the Georgian era, so London, Bath, Leeds. And these squares were actually inspired by piazzas in Italy. But as you say, they're completely different how they're used because they're gated off. And piazzas in Italy, they're more often than not open to the public, so everyone can use them and they're really the life and soul. Whereas these are sort of these gated private garden squares, which came of being surrounded by sort of townhouses in the centre of cities. And so for us, this really sums up the kind of the root of what is behind our project about opening up privatised public spaces for everyone to use. And as you enter the pavilion, you're sort of confronted by those railings and you can see this activity going on behind. You're sort of forced to go around the entire pavilion before you find yourself back inside the garden square.
That you see there's lots of objects from stools to tools to different things that use the railings and in a more productive way. And what we're really asking people to think about in that room is how opening these spaces up would allow for so many more people to use them. And then the big structure that's made with the blue Finsa material at the center of the room has different areas. So that's divided into 5 different areas where you can cook, you can grow produce, you can sit and have a conversation, or you can sit by yourself in some of these alcoves and like spend some time contemplating, you can play.
Yeah, I mean, pubs are really the heart of communities up and down the country, and they've been like that for sort of generations. I think it's much more than just a place for drinking, which is often what people sort of assume it is. And you've got pubs closing down up and down the country for a number of years now. And it's really been exacerbated over the past year when every single pub was forced to shut. So we're looking at how do you actually reinvent the pub for the 21st century? How can it be something which is sort of a community, for community uses sort of 24 hours a day, that's also really inclusive, that goes much more beyond just being a watering hole. You know, it's got all these other functions to it.
In the history of the UK, it's been a really political space as well, and because it was one of the spaces where people used to come together to debate different ideas. And by losing the pub, we kind of lose that space of discussion and debate where people from different backgrounds and different walks of life can meet and discuss things. And in a way, it's like the original privatized public space, because it started as people like opening up their living rooms to the public to let them in.
We want anyone to enter the pavilion and immediately engage with the conversation and the debates and really understand what it is that we're trying to explore. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of the heart of our exhibition, really, is creating these kind of physical installations rather than sort of a traditional exhibition of lots of text and images on walls.
Big thank you to Finsa for all the support. I mean, so much of this project would never have been possible without you, and we really enjoyed using the material, and it allowed us to bring this painting to life. So thank you.
I remember when we first met with Aurora and she was showing us all the Finsa products we could use, and it was really amazing moment actually to, you know, really see all the different colours that you have on offer, and how we could sort of create all these really joyful installations and take that kind of joy from the painting